ready to go. Recording now.
Okay, it is 5:30 and this is the Tuesday, September 8th, 2020 regular meeting of the Palm Springs Architectural Advisory Committee. Planning Director, please do roll call.
Member Dosey.
Present.
Member Lockyer.
Present.
Member McCoy.
Present.
Member Payline. Let's see, I don't see him. Here he is, just a moment. Member Payline is joining us. Member Walsh.
Here.
Vice Chair Rotman.
Here.
Chair Jakeway.
Here.
And we have as our alternate, Member Thompson.
Here.
Okay, Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. May we have a staff report on the posting of the agenda, please?
Mr. Chair, the agenda was posted on Thursday, September the 3rd. This meeting has been noticed and posted in accordance with state law.
Does anybody on the committee have any revisions to the agenda?
Mr. Chair, I will just note that on agenda item number 3, which is case number 3.4169, staff is requesting to continue that item to a date certain of September the 21st.
Okay, thank you. And I would also like to just point out and remind the committee that item number 2 is part of the consent agenda. So we won't have discussion or any action on that other than approving it as part of the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to accept the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Who was the second?
John.
John McCoy?
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, since this is a public meeting, audience members are permitted to comment on any issue that is within this committee's purview. Planning Director, have you received any requests from the public to make comments at this time?
Yes, we have received a request from Chris Menrad to speak on agenda item number 5. If Mr. Menrad is available, I'll ask him to go ahead and offer his comments now.
Okay.
Hello.
Here he is. Mr. Menrad, you have 3 minutes to make your comments, please.
Oh, great. Wow, this is soon. I just logged in. Yeah, basically, in my letter that I wrote this morning, I really want the Architectural Advisory Committee to take a look at this project. It's pretty bad from a design standpoint. It's just got, I don't even want to get down to why it's bad. It just is. But the main thing is that, you know, we're known as a city of architecture, and we've got a lot of great vintage architecture, and that's what brings everybody here for these heritage tours. But, you know, going forward, we have to pay more attention. These developers have certain rules and regulations about what they can do based on size or location or all that sort of stuff. But we have to encourage better architecture than this. I mean, the stuff that we have in downtown right now is really pretty bad. I mean, it was done under a compromised city council, as we all know, but we're not that way anymore. So I think that we need to take a better look, encourage better architecture, and, you know, just that should be an important part of the conversation about not just the size, location, or what's going to happen with the building, but what it looks like, because it's there for a long time, and, you know, we have to look at it. So I think I really want to encourage you to be very critical of this particular, because this could be anywhere. This has nothing to do with Palm Springs, what they're putting up. Could be in any city, anywhere in the country. And most of the buildings downtown actually could also be in any place, anywhere in the country. And I do real estate, and most of my clients say to me, what happened in downtown? Who let that happen? Why is that looking like that? And we know the answer because, you know, it was a compromised city council before, but we're not. So that's just my words. Please be critical of this architecture. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Menrad.
Yep, my pleasure.
Okay, moving ahead. Do we have any revisions to the minutes of the previous meeting, of the July 20th meeting? From this,
I have one comment.
Stan.
It looks like I voted on everything, but I was not in attendance. I was on vacation at that meeting.
Okay.
I approved everything.
Okay, we will note that.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else have any revisions? Do we have a motion to accept?
Okay, Mr. Chair, as part of your motion on the consent agenda, it will include not only the minutes, but also item number 2. Just note under item number 2, staff is going to be making a request on a minor modification to the change in the color of the roofing materials, but we will handle that at a staff level. So again, your vote is on items number 1 and 2.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Do we have a motion to accept item number 1 and 2 as the consent agenda?
Motion to accept consent agenda.
Thank you, John. Second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Approved. New business. Item number 3, as we heard, has been moved to a date certain in the future. So we're going to move to item number 4, a request by Fumiko Docker of Pencil Box Architects, Inc. on behalf of Cookies for a minor architectural application and a sign permit application to paint 2 exterior columns in cookie blue and install signage at a new cannabis dispensary facility located at 777 North Palm Canyon Drive.
Anyway, I should probably get the rest of my poop in a group here with them. And
We have somebody, Flynn, that shouldn't be here.
seeing Michael was a bit-
If you'll give me just a moment.
Yep.
Okay, I think I've taken care of it.
Okay, thank you. So we are moving to item number 4. Do we have a staff report?
Yes. Give me 1
Okay.
second. Oops.
Ms. Noriko Kikuchi will please give the staff report.
Yes. Let me share my screen. Can you hear me?
Noriko, if you could adjust your volume, we can barely hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me better now?
Barely. If you could just move a little bit closer, perhaps to
Okay. Is it better now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So this is a proposed exterior alterations to a new cannabis facility located at 7 North Palm Canyon Drive. So this business is a new cannabis dispensary facility in Uptown, and the applicant is proposing to repaint 2 columns in the cookies blue, and then also to install a new signage. And the proposed project does require review and approval by the AAC and the City Council. The signage review ends with AAC. However, the exterior painting of the columns does require City Council review as well. And these are the photos of the project site, Cookies building. It's a very simplistic building right now. The business will be occupying the ground level tenant space that faces North Palm Canyon Drive. And this is a proposed color, Cookies blue. And the applicant also provided the products that the business will be providing at the site. And as you can see, this blue is their signature color. And they explained that their intent is to promote their California-grown cannabis brand. And also, this color was actually taken from the desert sky. So that's going to tell you the intent of the applicant, why this color is proposed. The application proposes to paint 2 columns. And as you can see, they are proposing to paint 2 columns that are the closest to their the business suite. And then also proposing to install a window signage. Staff finds that the proposed signage exceeds the maximum allowable letter height, and then also
Hey, this is Chris with Compass Real Estate in Palm Springs calling you back.
also the amount of signage that's being proposed. And then also the cookies blue is not a typical desert neutral color. When we talk about the desert neutral color palette, which usually consists of white, light beige, light brown, and such colors that can be found in the natural environment. However, the applicant explains in the justification letter that was a part of the packet that the color was taken from the desert sky color. And then also the staff finds that based on the typical desert neutral color palette, painting the columns in the cookies blue is inconsistent with the general plan community design guidelines policy, which encourages the use of desert neutral colors such as white, light beige, and brown. However, the proposed signage color is consistent with the general plan design guideline policy. And for the reason, the staff recommends AAC approve the proposed signage subject to the conditions recommended by staff, which are included in the report. However, recommends the denial of the proposed painting of the 2 columns to the City Council. And this concludes the staff presentation, and the applicant and the business are also available if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kukio. Do we have any questions from the committee of staff? I do have one question. Kukio, in your staff report, you mentioned that the Palm Springs zoning code allows each glazed area on either side of a customer entrance may contain an identical sign. The combination of such sign shall be deemed as one sign. Does that mean they can have their maximum square footage of sign on one side and then repeat it on the other side and it doesn't count as signage area again? Or do they have to put half of their maximum signage on one side and half on the other?
Well, the zoning code states that, and it provides a total window sign area that's permitted. So it is my understanding that the total signage area includes both signs.
Okay. So if they were to duplicate a similar sign on the 2 sides, the 2 added together would have to be under the
Correct.
the threshold. Okay, thank you. Anybody else have questions of staff? Is the applicant present? And if so, would they like to make a presentation?
Yes, hi, this is Allie Dean from Cookies and also Fumi, our architect of record.
Okay.
Just want to say good evening to the committee and thank you for reviewing our dispensary application for the Uptown District in Palm Springs. Cookies is very excited, anticipating the opening of our first retail location in Palm Springs, where we'll be hiring local staff, bringing our best practices for operating and maintaining buildings constructed of this age, 1979, generating revenue for the city and generally participating as a responsible business owner in Palm Springs. We thank Noriko and her team for their review as well. I wanted to make mention of the photographs shown in the presentation also were taken after Cookies remedied some pre-existing loose tenant, I guess, improvements over what was there before. So if it's all right with the committee, if we could also show our screen and just walk through some of the color justification. And then I'll turn it over to Fumi, who will discuss a little bit from the architectural side. From Cookies' standpoint, this is part of our brand journey, our specific branding aspects that are pretty integral to how we present ourselves within the community. We've taken a step back on our original proposal, which was to paint the building and conform within the Uptown District Code, to just being some columns to differentiate our suite from other suites within this building. In reviewing the street as well, we also noticed a variety of color palette being used to accentuate, I guess, other architectural elements up and down the block. So we were also seeking to understand what the restrictions around the color palette specifically are, so we know what is or is not indicative. Our blue, we are of the opinion it's a sky blue. The desert has beautiful sky that you can actually see on your screen right there that we think conforms pretty nicely. We would seek to understand what is considered part of that desert palette. So I will turn it over to Fumi now. Fumi, you might have to *6 your phone.
Ms. Docker, we cannot hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was on mute. I echo Allie's thanks to Noriko for walking us through the planning process. We're really grateful to her, especially because COVID presents its own set of restrictions. I did want to share, following up on Ali's request. Let me just bring up the file. We're taking a look at the, sorry, I'm having trouble locating it, at different street facades on the same road, North Palm Canyon Drive. And we're hoping, because this is a California-based brand and it's in keeping with this desert blue sky, that we could accentuate the two columns of an otherwise, very neutral building. And, okay, here it is. If I can share my screen, let me see. Do I have the ability to share the screen, or?
Ms. Kikuchi, you'll need to stop sharing your screen if Ms. Docker is to use her screen.
Excuse me, sorry.
No, no problem.
Sorry, having a problem here.
And we, just as a note, we do understand more concretely the requirements of the signs, especially area. So we will be working with Noriko based on your recommendations to reduce the quantity and the size of the signs per the requirements, including the 10-inch letter height and the 16-inch maximum logo size.
Ms. Docker, you may share your screen now.
Okay, thank you. All right, if I'm sharing now, we just wanted to share some of the facades that we've noted on North Palm Canyon Drive in the vicinity, and we were hoping that, sort of in keeping with some of these other buildings that have included some, not necessarily beige, desert neutral, if it's a strict interpretation of beige, browns, and tans, but there are some relatively bright colors, which we think, yes, are indicative of the desert and Palm Springs. So we're hoping that we might be able to do something similar, just to give this building facade, this is a much older picture, some interest beyond the off-white neutral color that it is now.
I just want to make sure, can everyone see the screen right now?
No.
No, we can't.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was sharing.
You should have an icon at the bottom of your screen. Share screen.
Yeah. Yes, I thought I was in. Okay, I apologize. I picked the screen, but not the share button. Okay, here we go. So here's the
Now we can see
original. Okay, I apologize for that. Here's some original image of the facade. And then what we're hoping is that we can actually, no, it doesn't let me show other images. Okay. Sorry, I have dual monitors, so it's not allowing me to. Here we go. Thank you for bearing with me. Anyway, these are some of the facades that we find along North Palm Canyon Drive. And we were hoping that we could, in keeping with these, apply some color, specifically the blue, beyond the beige. And it would be somewhat in keeping with, for example, these pink accents and lime green accents that you see on other building facades. And we hope it's subtle enough to be in keeping with the original architecture, but also provide a little bit of interest on the facade for cookies. With that, I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, so I think just to wrap up then, what Cookies is seeking to do is obviously, it is still conforming with the Uptown District. It is in an attempt to also guide customers from, the parking lot in. We've since remedied the former tenants' paint and signage at the request of the city. So we are incurring additional expense as well. And then the photos that we showed here today just kind of show you an even darker blue tone that was originally incorporated as part of this building. The greens, the blues, the purples, the vibrancy that you would find up and down North Palm Canyon and around the surrounding streets there. So, it's part of our opinion that we think that this one conforms to the desert palette that they seek to uphold, and then two also satisfies us on our brand journey. So with that, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you, Fumi. At this point, we would normally have public comments. Planning Director Fag, has there been any any requests for public comments?
Mr. Chair, we haven't had any requests for comment on this item.
Okay, then I will conclude public comment. And now, does the committee have any questions of the applicant? Robert.
I have a question for staff. When On the Mark was a tenant in that space, was all that signage and the painting of the low wall, was that all permitted or was that unpermitted?
It is my understanding that the painting of the wall was not permitted.
Having trouble hearing you now, Noriko. Now you're muted. I think you muted yourself.
Yeah, we're not hearing anything at all, Noriko.
Give me 1 second.
We hear you now.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, you unmuted.
It is my understanding that the painting of the wall, the shoulder wall in the green, that was not permitted. As for signage, I have to check. However, it looks there's more than the signs. I'm sorry. The quantity of signage that was found on the mark seems a lot more than what the zoning code would allow. However, we did amend the zoning code regulations for signage also. So that is something that requires a staff research.
Okay, thank you.
Uh,
Other questions of the applicant? Sean?
It is a question for staff. Sorry, I should have asked it earlier. As I look at the building, I wonder, I'm sure there was a landscape plan at one point for along the street facade. It's a question more for Noriko, potentially Flynn. All of the landscape, except for there's potentially one shrub more at the northern end of the front facade that's remaining. And I wonder if some of what's being proposed would not be as offensive if some of that landscape were back in along that building, enhancing that building there, and what could potentially be requested to be put back or enhanced on that building again in terms of landscape.
Mr. Lockyer, what we can do is review the approved landscape plan for the property and see if there are landscape materials that perhaps have been removed or have not been replaced, and have them reinstalled. So again, staff will go ahead and verify if the building is compliant with its approved landscape plan.
Okay, because I think, yeah. Okay, thanks, Flynn.
Any other questions from committee?
I have a question.
Tom,
If Noriko or the applicant, there's like a second or third picture down that shows the Palm Canyon elevation. And if there's a way to point out, you know, from their drawing that, you know, their storefront, but exactly which columns that we would see in that photograph would have the blue color on them.
May I share the screen? So the columns that the applicant is proposing to paint are the two columns that are closest to the business. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor.
Sure can.
Okay, so this one right here and this column right over here. So from a different angle, this column right here and this one in the back. Oops, sorry. This one in the back right here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question of the applicant. Is Cookies an existing business that has established stores in other locations, or is this going to be your first Cookies rollout?
Cookies has established retail locations in other areas.
So do they use this blue color on the outside of those establishments?
Yes, this would be the very first departure for us where we would have a non-blue building.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of the applicant?
Yeah, really quick. Was there anything proposed for the little, that wall, the signage wall in front where the currently says 420 Lounge? Or is that, there's no signage for that?
Yes, we had originally proposed to paint or affix signage to that location.
But no longer.
No longer part of the packet due to comments that we had received from the city. Fumi, would you like to speak to that at all?
Yes, as we understand from Noriko, because it's a multi-tenant building, that freestanding sign location can't dedicate a sign to any one retail business in the multi-tenant building. So we removed it. And I believe the 420 Lounge has or will be removing the sign, their existing sign as well, to be compliant with the zoning laws.
And if it helps the committee, Cookies has roughly 85% of this full structure with one other tenant in the rear. If it is up for consideration, we would absolutely love to update signage on the front with something that is conforming to the Uptown District.
When you say 85%, does that mean you're occupying the second floor? Because I noticed a lounge is moving in up on the second floor. Is that yours?
It's not necessarily our lounge. It is under lease by us right now. So we are not endeavoring to do anything with the rest of the space due to a variety of a mixture of COVID and also hardship concerns due to the amount of expense we've had to put forth to get the dispensary on the first floor open and operational.
Okay. Any other questions of the applicant? Okay. Thank you, Ali. Thank you, Fumi. We will discuss it now. Let's have our committee comments. Who has a comment for us, or a question or comment?
I'll start.
Sean.
I think that the blue color of the columns, especially the fact that they're aligned in elevation along that east facade, I don't find it all that offensive. What I was thinking was the building's really lacking landscape, and I think that if some of that area was enhanced that white gravel went away and those 3 beds along the building, as well as out front in the palm tree beds out on the street sidewalk area. I think it could go back to looking like a respectable building, and even help with the signage and the business itself. It would be nice to go back to a building owner and ask them to enhance that if they'd like us to approve this project somehow. It'd be nice to make that a contingency or a requirement, rather.
Okay, thank you. Did I say Steve? Did you have your hand up, Steve?
Sure, I'll go. Yeah, I mean, I actually think the blue color is fine. I was actually looking. It's the same color as one of the M's from the Modernism logo. So in a way, I don't have an issue with the blue color as an accent on those 2 columns.
Okay.
I think if they're adhering to the signage, regulations in terms of the letter height, then I'm good.
Thank you. Tom Dosey.
I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity. I know they are only 1 tenant in this building, but I think there could be an opportunity to do something with the columns, not just those 2, but all the columns that would provide some continuity, but it would almost look better if the ones along at the entrance to the garage and some additional ones along the frontage were painted versus just those 2 that kind of disappear into the garage area. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? John Walsh?
Yeah, I think staff kind of hit it right on this one. I think the columns to me strike me as an all or nothing kind of thing. This isn't the type of building that tends to divide up or bifurcate into specific street frontage presentations. So I would be kind of uncomfortable. I think it might look as though the project was half done if we were to have 2 columns so vividly different than the rest. The building as a whole is kind of quirky and interesting, and it just seems to need to be dealt with as a whole. And I realize that the approach by tenants justifiably is to focus on their spaces and whatnot. But I don't know. I think it could look not good if it starts getting confused and chopped up in terms of a presentation of what's going on to the street. So I'm inclined to support staff's findings on this. I think they're justified.
Thank you. Have we heard from John McCoy? Any comments?
I have nothing new to add.
Okay.
I think I'm gonna pass.
Thank you. Robert?
Yeah, I'm kind of I'm in agreement with Member Walsh's comments. I think just to have 2 columns blue is just inconsistent with the building. I don't think it's really going to enhance the customer attraction to Cookies. So I wouldn't be in favor of painting the blue columns blue. I think, I'm looking at a picture when On the Mark was there, and yes, I understand that it was not in compliance with zoning code. But even, and this is obviously up to the Cookies to decide how they want to do their signage. But I personally don't think that, I think there's probably a more effective place for them to put their signs than on the windows, because half of it is in the dark of the parking area. And I would just say, take another stab at where they should go. On the Mark had a blade sign on the face of the building, and they also had a sign on the another sign on the face of the building. I'm sure that they were not all legal, but I think in terms of pedestrian traffic and even vehicular traffic, the signage that they're proposing on the windows is going to be lost. So.
Thank you. And I agree with Robert's comment that I think the signage does get kind of it doesn't have much value to it. Especially, I was in that parking lot today, and the two windows that are furthest west, one of them had a big SUV parked in front of it, and the other, it was in such a dark area, you wouldn't see a logo on those windows. So I don't see a need for the applicant to apply for that, especially since that's going to exceed the quantity that's allowed. I appreciate and thank the applicant for responding to Noriko's information about reducing the letter size and the size of the logos. But yes, I think if it were a blade sign or something a little different, I think it might really catch your eye. The other thing that might affect this is on your drawings, you've mentioned that a mirrored film is going to be applied to the existing windows. First of all, City Council does not allow, if I understand this right, and I can be corrected by the planning director, doesn't allow the mirrored film to go on windows. So if you're not going to have the mirrored film, would that affect your decisions about how you would want to do signage or graphics on the building? As far as the color goes, I agree with some of the other committee members that, especially on North Palm Canyon there, we're getting a lot of accent colors on buildings, and they are pretty strong. And the blue doesn't bother me at all. I just think the application of it doesn't really do much for me. Just to have 2 columns out of 6, or maybe 8, seems odd. I think if anything, if you could just paint that low wall that used to be lime green the blue color and bring it in there, might be a more appropriate application. So I guess that's my comments.
Yeah, I wanted to add one more thing now that you mentioned that, is the thought of potentially doing more of a gradation or looking at the other columns and not doing them all the same blue color, but maybe grading them down as they go down the street so that it kind of emphasizes into the building. I'm not sure if the building owner is amenable to that, but it could be something that could help tie the thing together, but also kind of pull people that way from a color perspective. Just a thought.
Okay, any other comments? Yes, John McCoy.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult unit to identify that there is in fact a business there. But I do feel that adding the blue to the columns does not define exactly that the business, what it is or that it's there. So I'm going to follow with the staff's recommendations.
Okay. Do we have a motion? Motion?
I'll make a motion to continue the project.
Any specific direction or comments or
With some of the comments about reviewing the overall paint scheme and the additional columns, as well as the front monument or sign wall to be included in the repaint scheme.
And can we add to your motion the landscaping?
Yes.
Do we have a second?
How to add that landscaping though, Tom? Is it going to be conditional on this project, or should it be city owner? I think Flynn was indicating that.
Yes, what I might recommend, Mr. Chair, is on the landscaping, let staff work on that based off of the approved landscape plan. If we need to bring that back to the Architectural Advisory Committee, we will do that at a point in the future, but let staff go ahead and work on the landscaping.
And then would the freestanding low wall that had been painted lime green that's in the landscaping, would that be then part of the landscaping issue, not part of this tenant since they don't own that wall?
I think it needs to be part of an overall building scheme. And what I might suggest, Mr. Chair, maybe we could bifurcate this package. There seems to be 2 issues here. One is the signage, which I think is fairly straightforward, but the other is identification of the tenant space and building painting. What we might do is have the AAC approve the signage subject to the conditions that Ms. Kikuchi has proposed in the staff report, and then have the applicant come back with a repaint scheme that might involve more than just the 2 columns, looking at an overall scheme to help identify the building, if you will, based on your comments. And again, that would be subject to the AAC wanting to move in that direction.
Okay, John McCoy, we didn't have a second to your original motion. Would you like to modify it or change it at all?
Actually, Tom made the motion.
I'm sorry, Tom.
It's okay. Yes, I would like to amend it.
And would that be amended to say that we approve the signage with the staff recommendations and that we re-review the painting of the columns and the actual color of the columns as a different process?
Correct.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just to clarify for the applicant, again, the signage is approved per the staff conditions, and we will have them look at the color scheme for the building, and they can bring that back to the AAC at a future date. So that way we can keep them moving through the process on their signage. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to item number 5 under new business.
Can we ask for like a 3-4 minute recess before beginning this one?
Yes, let's do that. It's 6:14. We'll take a recess for 5 minutes.
Thanks.
Mhm.
Michael Braun, while we're on recess, who else from your team is participating in your presentation?
Good evening, Flynn. I will give a quick introduction and then we'll turn it over to Mark Kirkhardt and Dion McCarthy from Design Art, and then followed by the landscape architect, Tom Dosey.
Okay, Tom Kirkhardt?
No, Mark
Kirkhardt and Dion McCarthy.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Chair, we're ready to resume.
Thank you. It's 6:21 and we are resuming our meeting of the the Architecture Advisory Committee of September 8th. We're now on item number 5 under new business. which is DTPS B3 LLC, for a major architectural application to construct a 6-story, 82,577 square foot multifamily residential condominium building with 62 units located at the Block B1 of the downtown Palm Springs specific plan at the northeast corner of Bellardo Road and Museum Way. Before we have a staff report, Planning Director, can you explain that Mr. Dosey is recusing himself?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Dosey, who is on the applicant's team for this project, will not be able to participate in this item and will need to recuse himself. However, he may be available to respond to questions. What we are going to do is have Mr. Dosey turn off his camera until the point where questions are asked of the applicant. And at that time, we will bring him in to respond to questions, and then he will need to turn off his camera again. So with that, Mr. Dosey.
Chairman, I recuse myself from this item and will be available for questions if so needed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we're now ready for staff report.
Mr. Chair and committee members, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So let's see. So as you said, this is a major architectural application for Block B1 of the downtown Palm Springs specific plan. It is a 6-story building located on the site where the previous Virgin Hotel was slated for construction. The applicant is now seeking to develop a residential building on this site, which is located to the north of the Kimpton Hotel. It will be east of the proposed park that is under construction, and west of the 2-story building that fronts Palm Canyon. As you can see on the site plan here, it relative to the other buildings for the downtown project, it is surrounded by streets on 3 sides, and then there is the Paseo that serves as a pedestrian walkway, as well as an emergency access road in the event an emergency happens. So the project, it is located between Bellardo and Market Street, or the Paseo, and Arenas and Museum Way. For orientation purposes, north is to the right on the screen that you have here. And what you're looking at is the ground floor plan of the proposed building. What you see are residential units that pretty much occupy a majority of the floor space. There is a courtyard in the center. The main entry to the building will be located at the southwest corner, where there's a lobby, as you see at the top left of the screen, as well as some communal areas on the south side of the building, including an office, lounge, and fitness room. The trash and kind of back of house areas are located off of Andreas Road. You can see that on the right side of the screen here. And on the second floor, again, more residential units that surround the open voided area, the void area here, which you see below is the courtyard. You see the lobby area. There is an open lobby area that rises up to the 2nd story. And then as we get to the 3rd floor, there are, again, more residential units, a pool deck, and outside communal area, which is oriented towards the park and the southerly mountain views and the westerly mountain views. There are 2 access points that are 2 elevator access areas and staircases or stairwells on both the north and south sides of the building. On the 4th floor, additional units, as well as a sun terrace. And then the 5th and 6th floors are, again, more residential units. So the project has a total of 62 units with a variety of 1, 2, and 3 unit buildings. 11 1-bedroom units and 49 2-bedroom units and 2 3-bedroom units. The roof plan is what you see here on the screen. They do propose mechanical equipment inside of screened areas. And the building is 60 feet in height, which is consistent with the specific plan requirement for a new building at this location. And that is measured from the highest datum line or elevation point for this pad site. And so what you're looking at here is the west elevation, which would face the park area and the mountain. What you'll see, of course, here are the various materials that are being proposed. It's obviously it's stucco and blocks, cinder block, balconies, storefront glazing, metal panels, and perforated metal for the balconies. On the north elevation, which is facing Andreas Road, is what this is the elevation that you would see from the parking lot to the north. The south elevation is what you'd see from the Kimpton building. Is where you would see the outdoor pool deck. And then there are some photovoltaic panels above the terrace deck on the 4th floor. This is the east elevation, which would face the 2-story building and Palm Canyon. And then an east-west section of the building is what you see here. The below grade is the existing parking structure that is existing currently today. And this is a north-south elevation that gives you some context relative to the floors, the pool deck, and the overall subterranean parking garage, as well as the different elevations on Andreas and Museum Way. The applicant has provided some perspective views, which you see here. This is a view of the building from the southwest vantage point looking to the northeast, so towards the pool deck and the primary entry, pedestrian entry from the street to the building. And an overall view of the project is what you see here, the pool deck area, the interior courtyard void area. Again, from the kind of main entry to the project site is what you'll see more towards the intersection of the street. This is the viewpoint here. This would be a viewpoint standing southeast of the building, looking to the northwest down the Paseo. And as far as the landscape plan, this is built on an existing subterranean garage. So what they've done is incorporated raised planter areas. You can see those on the, basically most sides or all sides of the building, as well as on the interior courtyard areas, or the interior courtyard area where they have a couple of specimen trees and some, as I said, some raised planters. In terms of the design, it is generally consistent with what is done in the rest of the downtown project, so they are continuing that theme in the project. This is a kind of a depiction of the pool deck and the courtyard landscape areas. There's some Mediterranean palms proposed on the pool deck. In the courtyard below, there's an elevation of what you would see. There's a sloped planter that would be, that is proposed adjacent to private outdoor spaces for each of the units. So you see that on the patio elevation in the bottom, in the middle of the screen, and a section of that on the bottom right of the screen. This just gives you a sense of what the proposed lighting is, the landscape lighting for the project. So they'll be doing various uplighting and low voltage lights throughout. So that is kind of the overall design of the project. In terms of the mass and scale, the project is consistent with the downtown Palm Springs specific plan. Staff evaluated the setbacks, the maximum height, the building step back requirements, and the max square footage permitted by the downtown Palm Springs specific plan. And the project does conform to all of those requirements. It is important to note that, as I said, this was the previous location of the Virgin Hotel site. That project was 113,000 square feet. This is a reduction down to 82,000 square feet. So the overall scope of the project is reduced, or the overall scope of what was anticipated on this block is now reduced. The hotel is proposed at 60 to 70 feet in range. This is a 60-foot high building. So that just to give you a little context of what was previously approved and what is being before you today. The one item that staff noted as an issue in your memorandum is that the proposed building doesn't incorporate any ground floor retail, which does impact the user experience of the building, as well as how pedestrians when they interact or walk around the building, experience the building. So we did note that as a potential issue that the AAC might want to take a consideration of when looking at this project. We did receive 4 public comment letters, and those were provided to you. And so you have a copy of those. And I'll just touch on a couple of the items that were brought up in those, some of those comments. One was parking. And there was a question about whether this project had adequate parking. And that's something, of course, that the Planning Commission and City Council would ultimately review. But for the benefit of the AAC, we just note that this project is part of a project finance agreement that established parking being met under that agreement for the proposed project as a part of the overall downtown development. In terms of its design, you've heard comments today during public comment about concerns of the design relative to unique Palm Springs architecture. And then lastly, there's some comments about shade. That's something that we feel that there's adequate shade provided as a part of the project, but the AAC may want to review that. So with that, I will conclude my presentation and I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Does the committee have any questions of staff?
I have one.
John.
So David, the parking, how do they get from the parking garage below to this building?
So let me get back to the floor plan. Okay. So there's an existing access, there's 2 access points that are available right here where you see the stairwell. There's an access point there. And then there's another access point here where this stairwell is. So this is currently there now, and those would be the access points to the building from the underground parking area.
Including an elevator?
Yes. There's an existing elevator here, or there's, I don't know if it's built, but there is an existing elevator location.
Thanks.
John Walsh.
I've got a few questions here. David, on the issue of the elevators, 1 or 2 elevators descend to the garage? How many?
My understanding is there are 2, but if I'm incorrect, I'm sure the applicant will let us all know.
And just as I looked at the plan of the garage, it looked as though only 1. So open question there. Number 2, okay, I assume with that 60-foot height limit that there are further encroachments of it that are allowed and spelled out in terms of mechanical.
Correct. Yeah, there are some encroachments above that for the mechanical screening, and that is, I think they range from 4 to 6 feet above the roof line.
And all of that is compliant?
Correct.
Okay.
As well as I should also note that the elevator shaft is a permissible extension above the maximum height.
Okay, right. Staff report indicated that the height of this structure is lower than the hotel adjacent. By how much? Do you have any sense of that?
I don't know in terms of its the datum lines relative, but the overall hotel, I believe, is roughly 89 feet. But it's, again, a lower elevation than what this building is, because as
grade,
the property, it goes from north, it goes lower as you get from the north to the south.
Right. And you also, you touched on the parking issue, and I had trouble reading the, is it compliant? How many cars per units total? What is that ratio?
The parking is compliant as it relates to the project finance agreement. So as a part of the overall downtown development project and the specific plan approval, the city approved or determined that the parking proposed or the parking that was approved as part of the overall downtown parking garage would satisfy the needs of the development within the downtown specific plan, of the new development within the downtown specific plan.
Okay, and so simply put, how many parking spaces are in this garage immediately underneath the building?
You know, I don't know the specific number. The applicant might be able to provide some additional information on that.
Okay, okay.
Mr. Chair, if I might just jump in for a moment.
Yes, please.
The parking requirements will be evaluated by the Planning Commission and the City Council. The Architectural Advisory Committee is to confine their review to compliance with architectural requirements in terms of the design and massing of the building.
Couple more questions. Were you done, John?
Yeah, thank you.
Sean?
Yeah. David, the original height approval, is that the same or less than or more than what is being proposed now?
The original height had varying heights of 60 to 70 feet. This is a maximum height of 60 feet. So it's close to what was previously approved, but it was a little bit higher.
And you mentioned about the first floor retail, there being none here. How much was on the original hotel approval?
So they had some carve outs for retail along Museum Way, as well as a small area at the corner of Andreas and what's called out as Market Street. But generally, the rest of the ground floor for the hotel was really the communal meeting spaces and some banquet rooms, kitchen areas. So it was a mixture of different uses that that might activate a little bit more of that ground floor space than what we have here.
Thanks.
Question regarding shading.
Done.
Yes, the shading question, the landscape and layout of the sidewalks was determined with the downtown specific plan when it went through its whole design process. Has there been any changes with this development to what was approved previously? Any changes in the trees or tree locations?
I don't think there's been much of a change other than there's probably some additional recessed areas along Bellardo Way or Bellardo Road. You can see in the plan view here, there's some additional landscape and there's an overhang that extends a bit more than previously was proposed with the previous version hotel. But as far as landscaping, it is consistent with the landscape materials that were previously approved for the project.
Okay, that is that kind of shading. Then we can look at building shading. I'm sure the applicant has information on that. Thanks.
David, I have a question on Market Street, the Paseo. I noticed that there's bollards now to prevent normal traffic. Is that street used for deliveries or trash pickup or anything for the commercial building that's to the east of this?
I don't believe it is. I think this is really only an emergency access road. But I'll let the applicant clarify that because I believe there are loading areas directly adjacent to this building along the other adjacent streets.
Okay. And they call out, looking at this site plan on the northeast corner, a trash pickup point. But then they noticed that the dumpsters are inside of the building in that loading move-in area. Do you know how those two interact? Do they have to bring the dumpsters out of that thing and bring them over to the trash pickup point?
Yeah, that's a good question. The applicant will have to probably address that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions to staff? Okay, now it's time for the applicant. You have 10 minutes to present and 2 minutes of rebuttal if desired after any public comments. So normally we would have the applicant give their report, then we would go to public comments, though we've already had a public comment earlier. And then after public comments, if the applicant would like to rebut anything, they can. So please give us your name and let's hear your presentation, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Michael Braun, Palm Springs, North Palm Canyon from Grid Development. Grid Development is proud to bring forward the final component of our downtown project. The community and Grid envisioned in 2011 a first-class open-air lifestyle center with office, retail, restaurants, hotel, and residential uses. Today, our architects, Design Art, and Tom Dosey from TKD are presenting the final piece, a 60-foot high high-end, a 60-unit high-end community project focused on the baby boomer generation looking to relocate full-time to Palm Springs. Design Arc has been very successful creating exceptional residential communities in Palm Springs since 2001. For this project, they were directed to create an indoor-outdoor building that promotes the lifestyle of the desert with a focus on exceptional design, landscaping, and outdoor living. I'm proud to introduce Mark Burkhardt, Dion McCarthy, and Tom Dosey, and I'm available later on for questions you have that I'm also happy to answer regarding parking and other questions that were raised.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Braun. Who's going to be next?
Mark, I think you have to unmute.
Mr. Kirkhart, your microphone is muted.
Lower left-hand corner.
Mark Kirkhart, I'm Principal of Design Arc Architects, and I'm going to be handling most of the presentation here along with Tom Dosey. But I'd like to thank David for the staff report and see if you could please bring up the ground level plan that I could use to talk through. Yeah, that'd be good. That's good. So as Michael had mentioned, we were charged with coming up with a residential building that would be a good fit to finish out the downtown project and would actually could be considered kind of a cousin to the Rowan Hotel, which we were also the design architects on. And so our approach here was really an inside-out approach to the design of the units, and you can see that's ended up with getting all the units basically being single loaded. We do a lot of these residential communities all over the state. And of course, for higher efficiency, you'd have a lot of double loaded corridors with interior corridors, which we don't think is very appropriate for Palm Springs, nor does it allow for the best exposure of all these units. So inside out design, trying to really think about getting the maximum number of units to have that exposure to the west and to the mountain, as well as having the project open up on the corner, the southwest corner there, and really have the activities of the common areas exposed to the community. And that's also why we incorporated the fitness and the lounge and lobby along Museum Way, so that we would have some activity down on that level, on the street level. We understand that the previous earlier master plan envisioned some retail in these locations, and Michael has made it very clear, I think, and he can answer more questions from you, that this bricks and mortar retail just is really not happening. We have other clients that have named it now a vacant retail ordinance, that you require projects like this to have retail space on the ground floor, and it ends up being never occupied. So this is an approach to really bring more life to this site, and as Michael said, to have permanent residents downtown as opposed to transient ones, which we think would be a good addition and really create a sense of community. One of the approaches that we found to be most challenging here was to not have the residential units that are on the ground level have their living rooms right on the sidewalk. which would not be a very desirable living situation. So the real key to this, as you can see from this plan, is the ground level units actually address the internalized courtyard, with the exception of one unit on the northeast corner. The rest of them all turn to the inside. And then on the next floor up, if you wouldn't mind, David, going one floor up. Yeah. So here now we get units that are facing to the perimeter along the west, and then the units that back up to Market Street actually look out into that courtyard. And the higher you get in this building, those units along that Market Street block there will actually be able to get views of the mountain over the top of the units in front. So you can see here how this is, all the units are single loaded. And this really begins to show how the building erodes on the corner and steps back to really respect that corner, and a nice pedestrian experience coming down Museum Way, walking west on Museum Way, and getting nice vistas to the new park that's going to be straight across Bellardo from this project. So you can see we've really eroded the corner in order to have that happen. If you go up maybe one more level, please. And so here's where all the main activity, the amenity, ends up being created on the corner. That's only a 3-story high space, a 3-story high deck that's open. So we really feel that that's giving a nice view into this project for the community. And I would say, to try to wrap up, because I know we don't have too much time, I want to be respectful of that. Could you go to the perspective views, please? Building like this is really much better perceived in three dimensions. Maybe back one, please, David. This one, I think, really tells the story. This is a slight elevated view from in front of the Rowan Hotel, as you can see on the right here. This really shows how the building steps back and actually gives glimpses back into that central courtyard from even from the pedestrian scale. From over in the park, you'll be able to see and understand that there's a central courtyard inside of the building. So as David mentioned, we have met all of the target goals of the downtown of the specific plan in terms of undulation of the building, setback of the building, variety of materials. We're actually using we think a pretty sensitive material palette. What you're seeing here that might look like rust, we're not proposing that to be Core 10 steel. We've had a lot of experience in that, and we understand the issues with it in terms of how it bleeds out onto surfaces and so forth. This is a baked on Kynar finish that more or less resembles a rusted steel, a little bit warmer actually. And we think the color is quite close to the desert varnish on the rocks that you see in the lower portion of the mountain to the west. So I'm gonna leave the rest. Tom, and I guess Tom can't actually present his plan, but he's very sensitive, obviously. One of the questions that came up that I can't answer about the shading and the tree planting around the property, that is all actually installed. I'm sure you all know that. So that we are not proposing to change any of that. So those trees along Bellardo that were part of the original design that are intended to get large enough to provide shade on the sidewalk are all installed. They're there. We're not changing them. So that is all, that's, like I said, that's staying the same. And Tom has done a really great job of developing as much, even though we're on top of a podium, getting as much kind of landscape and very passive common area in here. So there's no real activity zones. We have a little outdoor fire pit with a shade structure over it, and done a nice job of landscaping. So the units that are on the ground floor actually have patios, you can see, that open out into that courtyard in the middle. Other than that, everything is facing out and single loaded. A question about the elevators I can answer. Only one of the elevators, that's the one at the main entry lobby, is proposed to go down into the garage. That's the one that would bring people from the parking areas up to this level and obviously up into the building itself, as well as both of those stairways. The other elevator is intended as a move-in, move-out service elevator. And so that, at this point, we're not proposing for that to go down into the garage. We're going to propose to do a traction elevator there so that we don't have to have a pit underneath of it. there's still a little bit of detail to be worked out in that. As far as the parking, there are literally hundreds of parking spaces under this building, extends further beyond our building. So as staff mentioned, that will be handled by the time we get to Planning Commission and City Council. I think our parking demand on this will be less than what the demand was for the hotel that's already been approved. See, I think that really concludes my presentation, but I'm certainly available for questions that you might have.
Could you clarify my question about on the site plan, a trash pickup area indicated at the northeast corner versus dumpsters in that trash area?
Sorry, I think, so trash currently is picked up along Andreas. And from my understanding, those bollards do not get removed for any deliveries on Market, but they do, trucks do stop at the end of Market and deliver across, and maybe Michael can elaborate on that. I think our idea was, I believe that trash pickup location was left on this drawing errantly because the plan is to have the trash can, the dumpsters be moved out of the building onto Andreas and picked up directly there.
Okay, thank you. So do we go to committee questions of staff, planning director, or rebuttals from the applicant? What's our next move?
Mr. Chair, our next move would be to have questions for the applicant from the AAC committee members.
Okay.
Confirm in terms of public comment that Chris Menrad was the only speaker who signed up for public comment under this item. Mr. Newell did mention that we did receive additional letters which were distributed earlier, and he also noted the comments for those letters. So with that, questions of the applicant.
Okay, thank you. Committee members, questions for the applicant, either the developer or the architect?
So I have a question.
Sean.
So I think you guys were on Mr. Braun earlier when Chris Menrad came out and had a little bit of a critique about the building and said that it does not jive or coincide with the architecture of Palm Springs. This may be a question for the architect also. As I look through these elevations, I'm wondering what is the design concept here, and how do you guys see this relating to Palm Springs architecture?
Dion, you want to answer that one?
Well, hi, Dion McCarthy. I might just say that, as Mark has already mentioned, the kind of design proceeded from the interior inside out. We tried to create a building which was sensitive to its actual location, which is a very interesting location. You know, if you will, tucked between an interior street and the back of house of retail, and then a beautiful public park. And as Mark has already mentioned, the view of the mountain, which is our iconic sort of sense of what Palm Springs is, to the southwest. One of our first acts when we designed the Rowan was to produce that window which looked at the mountain. Actually, in earlier versions of that scheme, that was supposed to be a kind of pause point where one checked in, and it was repurposed, I guess, as the place for the bar. And I think that image of the mountain and its iconography is important. So in most of the artwork that we've done in Palm Springs, there's always a bit of a tension between trying to provide beautiful views of that context and at the same time trying to defend against the sun, which can be quite harsh a lot of the time, at least until, you know, late afternoon when it goes behind the mountain. So I think there is an attempt to try to kind of use the grammar of the hotel, but not its institutional scale, to use the grammar of sunscreen to highlight various things like the windows and doors in a kind of order, but not necessarily draw too much attention to them. So, and the long and the short of it really is the kind of purposeful removal of the corner so that the building itself will appear as a very transparent object, not as a mass that occupies the block. With regard to the other kind of architectural features, you know, I honestly don't think I know how to address that other than to say that, you know, with regard to the usual palette of things that we use in our multifamily work, this is very near the highest end of it, that we were given instructions by Grit to really kind of produce a highly imageable building, and we tried to do that. I don't know if that answers anything.
John?
Thank you.
Anything else, Sean?
No, thanks.
Not at this point. Okay, comments from other committee members or questions?
No question. This is Dan.
Hi, Dan.
Mark, on the west side, on the Market Street side, where the entrances to the units are on those 5, 6 levels, was there any other thought given to how that could be done versus what we were presented with?
Well, the main thing, you may want to go to that elevation. We were really keen to keep the access to these units exterior so as not to be conditioning more space than we absolutely had to.
Just 1 second. Dan, I think you said west side, but did you mean east side?
You mean the east side. You mean the east side.
On Market Street, yes.
Yeah. So what we were trying to get at here was a kind of a very, you know, this is a single loaded corridor, and we really wanted to animate it and have a lot of variety of texture. I'm not sure if you can maybe zoom in on that a little bit. You'll see that we have a combination of some glass, some frosted glass panels, some kind of vertical and horizontal louver panels. We have some painted metal panels that actually that are bent in the plan view, so that when you look at them from an angle, you'd see one color when you're looking from one side and another color from the other. So it was really just to try to really kind of animate that and become a nice texture, not to make too much out of it. But so that even when viewed from a distance, you'd get early in the morning, you'd get a lot of shadow like you're seeing here. Yeah, I mean, there's a million ways to skin that cat. We thought that we were doing a good job of getting enough animation and variety to make it interesting while still having it be open air. And that was we felt that was very important. And by the way, this same pattern repeats inside the courtyard on the east facing side of those, the units that are then facing the mountains, the access. So this kind of textured approach of layering also appears inside the courtyard of the building.
Perhaps we could look at a perspective of it, maybe. Is there one that we could show?
Yeah, there's a Market Street perspective, kind of an oblique.
Just to get at the idea of those vertical sun
There you go, right
controls,
there.
which are one color as looked at from one direction and another color on their back sides as looked at from the other street.
Yeah, so the gold blades are perpendicular to the building. They're actually coming out towards you. So when they'd be painted one color on one side and another color on the other side. So once again, it's just, I think this kind of gives you a better idea of the kind of how the various textures kind of stack up. And, you know, we think it'd be very playful. We're going to have a lot of inputs. You know, there'll be soft downlighting, LED downlighting in behind there. So there'll be light coming out through it at night. We think it's actually a pretty handsome texture.
And this the part that looks like a screen next to those panels, is that, what kind of material is that? I mean, what
these like horizontal and the little louvered, those would be like a thin louver metal, probably aluminum, so that it doesn't, you know, it's not going to be wood. We're not using any wood on this building in terms of things that could go south. So, and you can see there's pieces of railing in there that'll have the perforated metal. So you've got a combination of, you know, horizontal louvers, translucent glass panels, metal panels that are bent three-dimensionally and finished with a Kynar kind of finish, and then the perforated metal on the handrails. So, I mean, there's a lot of textures going on in there. We think that's where the strength of this.
Okay, and one final question. Dion mentioned that, you know, the harshness of the sun, And yet I noticed that there's a lot of vinyl windows, and I'm concerned about how well they'll hold up to some of that intense sun just as it sets on the west side.
I don't think we're using vinyl windows. We're using aluminum windows.
It says operable vinyl windows on the sheets that we have.
That's a typo. We were not using vinyl windows.
It's an error.
It's an
Although
error.
we should mention also that you see also on the left of this image, there's a kind of frame that wraps every window so that we have sun control on both vertically and horizontally. And those occur on all of those double wide kind of windows, especially on the west.
All right, thank you.
Okay, other committee members?
Yeah, this, I had a question in terms of in this, actually, if you could zoom out a little bit, this actually kind of shows it well. This elevation at ground level feels a little bit sparse to me. As you walk by that, it's just kind of a 4-foot block wall with windows behind. So I'm curious to know, like, if there was a thought about how to make that a little bit more pedestrian friendly, number one. And number two, looking at the lounge and all that stuff. And I understand the retail, not wanting to add brick and mortar retail space in there, but potentially having a lounge slash coffee slash something for the tenants that could also be open to the public on that facade. Have you thought about having something that would actually engage the public a bit more rather than just that sort of, on that facade essentially?
Dion, can I take that?
Yeah.
So this is Michael Brown. Thank you for the question. The block wall along Market Street is a placeholder. We are in contact with Russell and Ann Sheffer from the Art Commission, and we are already talking to an artist that will have on that block some kind of an art piece or mural to attract people when they walk down Market Street, that this will be engaging and hopefully an Instagram moment for people to take pictures. With regard to the coffee shop, unfortunately, as you know, we were able to attract the Reserve Starbucks store on the corner of building block C, and they have an exclusive for the center. Otherwise, they would have not invested the kind of money they did to open up that Starbucks Reserve store. So I'm prohibited to open up a second coffee shop in those 3 blocks. It's a shame, but that's what has happened. As to retail, as you know, brick and mortar is unfortunately shrinking. It needs to be more special, but location is more important than ever. And we have certain demands from attractive mom and pop shops or national retailers, but without any exception, they all want to be on Palm Canyon because that's where the majority of the pedestrian traffic is. I hope that answered the question.
Further to Michael's comments, I think I would also add, first of all, the block wall that you see is in front of the window wall. Some distance. It's very hard to kind of make that out. And I do want to mention that was a subject of pretty intense debate within our studio about whether that should remain or not. So I think that there's a willingness to remove all or a portion of that. But also I wanted to mention that the exercise room, which sits right behind it on that active corner, has doors that are supposed to be able to slide open so that you can have a kind of open air experience. And it's our hope that instead of a coffee shop, that it's the interaction of, I don't know, people, the fitness center that might help. There's certainly a hope that it would be a fitness center that would be used at different times than a typical in-city fitness, which is usually very early in the morning or very late at night.
I'd also like to add, if we could look at if we could look at the landscape plan, this is maybe an issue with our rendering too. There's actually a substantial amount of landscape going in in that gap between the wall, as you can see here. So that is just not illustrated very well in our rendering. So there is a landscape that's going to happen in that zone.
You won't see any of that from the street. That's behind the wall.
Well, some of it's tall enough to be, that wall is only 4 feet high or something.
Okay.
That's right. And then,
Not a
and
6
then
foot high wall.
as we said, we are looking at options for maybe making that wall more of a breeze block or having it dematerialize as it stretches down.
Yeah.
Well, I'm more attracted to Michael's comment that it could be an art piece or an Instagram piece. I think that would be a great way to end this end of the building and kind of make it approachable from Museum Way.
Agreed. Agreed.
Other questions from the committee? I have a question, and it's just about the accuracy of the drawings. On the west elevation facing Bellardo, there, it seems like you're showing glazing on the first floor, but when you look on the floor plans, it's shown as a solid, uninterrupted wall. And then as you wrap the corner and look at the north elevation, the same question about that lower glazing, but also right where the point is on the second floor where you've got the dark wall on the floor plans, it's shown as glass of that second story unit continues all the way to abut the stairwell.
Yep.
So,
That's correct. So what you're seeing there is the ground, what we're calling the ground level, which are the units that look to the inside. If you go back to the west elevation.
Right.
So those are little high slit windows, and they're behind that wall. So on the lowest level in the bathrooms and the kitchens would have a high window to allow light into the back of those units. That's what you see between the floor and the wall. And then the units that are on the second floor actually have mostly glazing. This building, because of its height and the construction type, is going to be type 1 for the ground floor and the second floor. And so we will be able to have very large openings. And so we're thinking that those units are going to be people that like to be close to the sidewalk, and they're going to have it'll be some of those windows will be operable with glass balconies, not protruding balconies, but like a Juliet type balcony, so you could open your sliding door and have a piece of glass there. So that's what's happening on the second floor. And then those are little slit windows. They're basically the height that you're seeing them in that right there. The rest of it is being occluded by the wall. And
very
so
nice.
around that, that's the same thing going then around to the north. The same thing is happening. Does that answer your question?
It does, and I think that's a great solution. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for the applicant, developer, or architect before we have our discussions?
I have one more.
Dan?
What about, can you describe the shade material? It looks like it's solar panels above the sun deck, above the pool. Is that what that is? The sun is a solar power?
Photovoltaics, yes. We're proposing photovoltaics on the roof. They'd be the semi-transparent ones, that look really nice from underneath. You've probably seen those. You can get them in various colors, and then they would actually come and fold down. That last bit would fold down and be facing due south there. So yeah, we're using the photovoltaics as a part of the shade for that overlook, which you can see here.
We have done this on projects that we've done in San Diego and actually in Marina del Rey here in Los Angeles. If you go on our website, you can see those two examples. In the case of the San Diego project, which was finished last year at F and 11th Street, those photovoltaics wrap the entire sort of face of the building vertically as well as horizontally, because we had a southern exposure to work with in that particular case.
And of course, with all the CalGreen things that we have to deal with now in terms of code, we have the opportunity for even more photovoltaics on the flat roof areas. And since this will be ultimately an ownership project, one of the good things about that is we can set it up so that those photovoltaics will benefit individual units, as opposed to when you're doing it on an apartment project, you only really generally want to provide the photovoltaics for the house meter type of demands. But so we'll have those opportunities as well for photovoltaics for the ownership.
And they're generally installed just kind of how I'm seeing it, without any kind of trim on the sides or anything. It's just kind of just the panel itself.
Well, the panel it's held up by an aluminum structure. So
I know,
yeah,
I'm talking about trim on the sides of it. That when you're looking at it from, say, the museum side from the park, and you're looking at it, it looks like it's just kind of floating. Is there any kind of trim that goes on that?
There is a trim. There's a frame that they sit in, actually, which we didn't model, but you know, it has a relative thickness, and it's actually well done. It fits quite well.
but it's very thin. It's very thin, and it's purposefully thin. We don't want to put a big fascia on it.
Well, just in the drawings, it kind of looks unfinished.
Well, the panels themselves are, you know, the panels themselves have probably 1.5 inch aluminum frame around it. So
All right, thank you.
we'll get to that detail. We're concerned about it too. We want it to look good.
I think we could provide also some of those photographs I was talking about from those other projects, maybe, if that would help.
Okay, thank you. I think that's good clarification.
Can we take a look at the entry courtyard?
Sure, John McCoy?
Yes. Can you take a look at the entry courtyard and walk us through some of your thought process on this? What concerns did you come up with, and how did you address them, and how you've got a water feature in a public space? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, that we had some conversations even just earlier this afternoon about that water feature on the public side might evolve into something a little different, either some sculpture or like another art piece or planting. But the real idea is, I think kind of shows here, is that we wanted the ground level, the pedestrian level, to be, and I mentioned that briefly in my presentation, to be very eroded, so that people could turn that corner and get the views to the park right away without having the building go right out to the corner of the sidewalk. So I mean, you can see how much of that land, the public land, that we're actually giving way to the public in front of our entrance, and the glass line is well behind those columns. So the columns are actually supporting the pool level, but you could walk, pedestrians could interact with those and actually go behind them. So
well, I think you can see the former corner of the hotel in gray on the sidewalk. That line traced is where it was, and the glass line is showing how far back we've pushed the building so that we can create this kind of corner plaza.
Yeah, so that was the main thing that drove the first, and that's a double level high. That's two levels high, because the pool is actually up on the 3rd level, as we mentioned. So has a very nice sense of volume, and I think you'll get really great views of the fantastic park that's going to be there very early on, before you even get to Bilardo, which I think will be great. There's a big water feature in the park, as we understand it as well. So.
And also Tom has arranged so that there's one of the specimen trees is actually available for view from the exterior looking in. So you're going to see green and a courtyard rather than, you know, more building.
Yeah, if you could go to the ground level plan. There you go. You can see that. So that the lobby itself is glazed on both sides, as Dion has said. So when the pedestrian is turning this corner and looking through the lobby, you'll be able to see right into that. You can see there's kind of a large tree right there, right opposite those double doors. So the whole idea is that you get a glimpse of that kind of bit of an oasis in the middle of the building. So we think that that's going to be it'll be a very nice view for for the pedestrian walking by. It's really letting the building itself spill right out into the public.
On both your renderings and elevation drawings, you're showing palm trees projecting up above the top of the 6-story building as if they're coming out of this courtyard. I assume that's artistic license. That's not correct.
Artistic license. Tom took that away from us real quick. Yeah. That was a very good idea.
Okay, thank you. Any more committee questions? Gentlemen from Grit and Design, thank you very much. And we quite possibly will have some more questions as we have our discussion.
Thank you.
Okay, committee. Let's start with the discussion of our, now, we need to remember that we're not talking at all about parking. We're talking about the exterior design of the building. We're looking at the materials. We're looking at the massing. We are not judging the height of the building. That's already been accepted by the city council. We're not judging the setbacks of the building unless they didn't comply, but they have. So it's the massing, it's the architecture, and it's the materials that we want to really concentrate on. Who wants to go first? And I'll let you go again if you go first. Robert, the camera's on you.
I'm not ready yet.
Okay.
I'll start.
John McCoy.
I'll speak to the landscape. I think there's very limited quantities of landscape, but I think the plant selections are great. I think, it is above a parking garage. So in terms of soil surface for the roots, the trees are appropriate. And I think that what has been specified will work. I had a concern about the east elevation, but they addressed that with the public art, and that portion is still in development. Yeah, I think in terms of landscape, it looks good. I like the paver choices, and I look forward to seeing the final development of it.
Okay, thank you, John. Who's next?
I'll go. I'll jump in. On the south elevation, the long 4-foot long block wall, I think it kind of breaks the line of the building, and the shape of all the windows that run along the street level there seem kind of busy. I think that if they had bigger pieces of glass that kind of match more of the entry, it would make the building look a little cleaner and a little more light. That's all I have to say at the moment.
Okay, thank you. John Walsh, are you ready?
Sure. Let's see. As I kind of went through the drawings, I can appreciate the challenge and the struggle with respect to density, the particulars in terms of the program that you have to succeed with, the opportunities for views, etc. There are some key elements to the building massing that I would have some concerns over. And although these are challenges, I'm not sure that they are fully addressed. One of them is the access to the units by the owners and the way the circulation works there. I realized that it was an alternative to a double-loaded corridor, but I am troubled by the process of getting into the units and how the circulation hangs off of the perimeter walls of the courtyard. I think that can be acoustically challenging. You see people's guests and owners coming and going. You're constantly aware of building traffic in that type of a enclosed courtyard condition. I would worry that it would really connote kind of a higher end market point in terms of how it presents. As I look at the pool area, I think it just, it sort of stacks. You've got a couple key outdoor spaces. I see the lounge chairs that are sort of beneath a podium level above it. It might be a little odd. I think one of the challenges of it, yes, the building mass is broken up, but we kind of end up with a lot of, they are non-related outdoor spaces that each maybe kind of are addressing the particulars around them, but they don't hang together as a whole. And I think I would take another step in this direction by saying the building does not necessarily hang together as a whole in terms of the massing and what it's doing. So those are just some things that I think I would give second consideration to in terms of this being the final word in terms of design direction. There are other smaller things in terms of the architecture materials and whatnot, but I'll be quiet for a bit here.
Thanks, John. Steve?
Okay, so one functional thing I'm thinking is if I'm an owner of the the northeast unit, parking in the structure and walking all that way from one elevator from the far end of the building is not going to be a pleasant experience. I mean, it's a long walk. So I'm wondering if you should reconsider the idea of having a second elevator for the residents, because it just feels like it's going to be a very long way to run. Number one. I'm overall pretty much a fan of the massing. I think in general, I think it really works well. I like the opening of the corner. I do still have the concern about the pedestrian experience both along the side street, which I think you guys are going to address on what is it, Museum Way, as well as I'm looking at it, Bellardo as well has a very long kind of block wall. And I know there's planting there, but I just think there could be a little bit more fun and whimsy there for people that are walking along that long stretch with kind of no covering. So I think I'd like to see those two things addressed as well.
Thank you. Sean?
Yeah. I guess I have a couple more questions too. I hope it's not too late. Did we touch on anything about HOA regulations in terms of balconies, outdoor furniture, window treatments, barbecues? Sorry to be a late caller with that one, but curious.
This is Michael Braun. There will be HOA regulations with regard to what people are allowed to have on the balconies. It's very important to us how the building speaks to the public, especially in front of the public park. So we will have those restrictions in place. Yeah, no barbecues as one example. There will be no barbecues allowed on the patios or bikes or anything like this.
Is there a continuity in the outdoor furniture that they're allowed to have out there? At least, yeah, go ahead.
We haven't really thought about this yet because we have not created the HOA or the CCNRs, but we're very concerned about what you mentioned. So it's a good question, again, because we want to maintain the integrity of the building. So there will be stringent regulations in order to maintain that.
Yep, thank you. I guess my comments are with some of the materials. I feel like we have a lot of questions here. If this feels like maybe an earlier design development set, which probably makes sense, now's the time to submit that. But it does say operable vinyl windows, which I had highlighted and put a question mark on, so I understand if you're not doing that. This still looks very busy to me. There's a lot of materials and feels like there's a lot trying to be achieved here when maybe a simpler method could help give people the sense that this was a simpler, more grounded, earthy like building. This general aesthetic, as I look at the Design Arc website, seems like there's quite a few projects that have very many similarities to this project. And I think that's why I asked early on what the design concept was for this project in particular, and in response to Chris Menrad's comments. So I wonder if some of this could be simplified in materials and potentially colors, details. for instance, there was the east facade, east elevation. I'm just going to get over there. Page A202. Quite a few things going on there where you guys seem to be excited about the multiple colors on those blade walls or fins, as well as then there's a perforated metal design there. And then you mentioned a Courtyard finish on that material rather than a Courtyard, and evidently you've had some bad experience with that. Maybe that was just the location or placement of that material in the past, but anyway, I wondered if maybe you might explore something like that or a similar material. Maybe it's a copper or brass, bronze, something like that, in lieu of some of these other finishes that don't seem very earthy or related to the desert. For instance, some of these perforated panel ideas, some of these other yellowish gold colors could make sense, but I'm not quite sure I get them and how they relate to maybe the desert architecture with so much white and silver, or the clear anodized aluminum frames. It feels like quite a few of these other projects. There's this NoHo project I'm looking at, and I see some similarities there. There's a few others on the website. Alexan aspect. The moving on to circulation, I'm a little worried about that also. On some of these upper floors, like the level 6 floor plan, for example, which I think is very similar to the level 5 floor plan. If a guest or an occupant or an owner is outside walking to their unit, what is their experience like? Is it a very hard concrete surface they're walking on, up against a very hard stucco wall surface? Then they're looking over this balcony here, which it's almost like the walkway feels a bit narrow. I wondered if there could be some landscape introduced on some of these upper terraces now and introduced into the plan rather than having the HOA do it later, because I feel like there's something that the HOA is going to come to the realization that it's just kind of dead and maybe slightly a bit industrial feeling experience as you walk through those catwalks. And then there's even some alleys I see created here, particularly on the eastern end of those catwalky areas. And then the whole east side, I think it's got the potential to be dark and hard and almost slightly dismal, where I can see homeowners wanting to liven that up or soften that up, and then the potential for a lot of creep and different types of plants or potted things going on. And anyway, just kind of worry about what that might turn into, especially from the ground looking up in some of these areas. Also agree on the one elevator, I guess, that northeast quadrant, even the whole east side, is a bit of a hike with groceries, kids, stuff. That's all I really had.
Thanks, Sean. Robert, now it's your turn.
Yeah, well, I essentially am in agreement with a lot of the comments that have been made so far. I think it's a challenge to take a building of this size and height and bring it down to some human scale. And I think that's what the effort is with all the variation of massing, materials, that sort of thing. And I think it really, I think it could use some simplification. I think also having a 6-story courtyard is problematic. And I don't, I think the sound, the visual experience as a resident of what you see, even if you incorporate some of the design elements that you talked about with the Kynar panels or the louvers or glass, I still just think it's going to be a pretty dismal experience. I also think that the east elevation, although it looks, you talk about it being playful and there's a lot going on, I'm almost think it's going to look like a tenement, even though it has all these elements. Just because you've got 6 stories of balcony way opening out onto the street. I think, you know, this is a wonderful opportunity for something really unique and really Palm Springs. And I think it's kind of generic. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Robert. I have just some amplification, I think, of a lot of the comments that have already been made. Regarding the elevator, I think it's pretty unrealistic to think 66 units or 62 units are going to basically use one elevator with the second that's kind of a freight elevator, kind of not. Especially in today's COVID world where you can only put 4 people in an elevator, you could wait half an hour to get up to the 6th floor. I think playing with what Robert just said, for the building to be 6 stories tall on all 4 sides, both from the exterior facades and from the courtyard, is a real challenge because now you got a big box. If there was something that could let the height of the different wings have some variety and variation to them, I think that that would be a huge change to this. The courtyard, looking at the sections, you can see that those are pretty brutal, straight up walls. There's been talk about the eyebrows around the windows, which I agree gives some definition to the, not definition, some detail to the building, but I think it's kind of disingenuous to say that those are really going to be shade elements because they're only, looks like projecting out 18 to 24 inches. So they're going to wrap a little shade line around the edges of the windows, but that's all. The exterior design from the north, east, and south side, I think is close. I agree with Sean that it's a little too busy, but there's a variety to it and there's a movement to it. I think the total design of the building falls flat with the elevation of the east side that faces Market Street. It looks to me like a cell block at San Quentin. It's just these horizontal balconies. The face of the balcony matches every single one above it. All the doors match behind it. And so you're trying to, as people have said, put lipstick on a pig by sticking all these little elements on it. But I think you need some significant architectural movement to that side of the building. There needs to be some balconies that project out. Maybe the whole 3rd floor is set back 3 feet from the 2nd floor and the 4th floor. Something to give some true interest and movement to that side of the building. And I think whatever you do to that side of that facade is going to kind of then automatically mirror itself into the courtyard and improve the courtyard elevations. So it's on the way, but I think there's some work that needs to be done.
Tom, I'd like to.
Robert?
Yeah. So the other thing, you know, you have this kit of parts. Basically, you've got the window surround, you've got the balcony treatments, you've got the use of the different materials. I would actually like to see the building respond more environmentally to what you're facing. If you're facing west, maybe you have a different kind of overhang. If you're facing south, it's shallower. I mean, really take a look at what the environmental impact is on the building, do a solar study, and really respond to that instead of having the same elements on all 4 elevations. I think it will add some variety to the building. but it can all be within the same language, but it will add more interest and make a more honest building.
Sean, did I see your hand up?
I like what the last, Tom, you and Robert had to say. It seemed to make some sense, and I think some of what my hypothesis is that some of the public comment that feels like this building looks like some of the other buildings on your website and very similar of Orange County and LA. I think that's what I was hearing. Maybe that problem solves itself with what we're talking about here.
Thank you. Anybody else have additional comments?
I just had one minor thing. One
Yes.
amenity I didn't see here, and when you mentioned the barbecue grills on the balcony, I don't, if you have common areas, I mean, that's a really popular amenity now with these kind of complexes, to have a common grilling area for people to have, to do that, especially in Palm Springs. I think it's important to have something like that. So maybe that's something that could be introduced in the interior courtyards on a couple levels, that could introduce some variety and pop to certain areas.
Yeah, we have those shown, but yes, that's a good comment.
And kind of to relate to that, there's only one restroom that I can see that's at the swimming pool or sun deck area. I don't know that that's either, I don't know if there's a health code that requires a certain amount of restrooms for a certain number of people, but it might be something you need to look at. Anything else?
We're aware of that requirement.
Okay. And one satisfies it?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
We'll confirm it, but we're pretty certain.
John McCoy?
Yes, thank you for all your comments. I agree with I like the idea of the shade study. I think looking at some of the natural metal materials would be terrific as they age and have a little bit more active variation with them. And then also, nobody addressed the tower that houses the emergency exit and the elevator. I think where the solar panels and that tower come together, you've got a huge plane that's going to be visible from the park that, it's a big concrete block wall. So it's a big bleak piece in my eye. Thanks. That's all.
Thank you. Anybody with any final comments? Do we have a motion? May we have a motion? Sean, you going to take a stab at it?
Oh, shit. No.
Okay. Robert?
Well, I could. I don't know whether we continue with this, we deny it. I think we've made a lot of comments and that we'd probably like to see it come back and address some of the comments we've made. So is that a continuation?
Let me ask Flynn about that. Flynn, what is the difference between a denial and a continuation?
A denial is where you find that it doesn't meet the architectural criteria and basically the applicant needs to do substantial modifications to make it conform. What I've heard from your comments is that generally it conforms. However, there are a number of items which you've listed that you would like to see further studied or revised. Based on that, what I would recommend is that your motion is to continue the item, to have the applicant look at the list of items for revision or restudy, and then to come back to the Architectural Advisory Committee.
Thank you for the clarification. So now do we have Mr. Rotman?
Well, I'll move to continue the project. And if Director Flynn, if I can read off a list of the comments, or David, I don't know who's keeping notes.
Mr. Newell, perhaps you might have more complete, but
Yeah, so I have a number of items that I've written down here, over a page and a half of items that I can forward to the applicant, but generally there's some discussion about simplifying the building, adding some glazing on the south elevation, addressing the east elevation in terms of the comments that some of the committee members had, as far as simplifying materials and colors, especially the perforated metal and yellow gold accents. There was comments about the concern with circulation and the user experience, especially as it relates to the elevator only being, especially as it relates to the project only having one elevator, and the units that are at the northeast portion of the site. There were some comments about also related to that, simplifying materials and colors, adding landscape into the upper terraces, as well as adding additional voids to the building to allow additional relief for the structure as it relates to the design appearing as a box-like structure.
David, I think I would add a very important one: to consider the solar applications specifically for the orientation of each facade of the building, maybe using different materials or detailing the materials in different ways as they appear on each of those facades. And that in itself will help to give the building, I think, a little more interest.
Okay. There was some current, as well as, and that probably relates to your comment, Mr. Chair, is the courtyard needs some relief. These items are really to address the architectural movement within the building or on the exterior of the building. Let's see, there was a comment about adding common grilling areas, whether it be in the courtyard area and or on outdoor upper floor areas. And a comment related to the concern with the large tower facing the park.
Okay, I think we can add David's list of comments to Robert's motion to continue. Do we have a second?
Second.
John McCoy seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much. So that is the last item on our agenda. Do we have any committee member comments just in general, not necessarily on these specific items? Any staff member comments? Our next meeting is when, Flynn or David?
Our next meeting will be on September the 21st. And
2 weeks from yesterday.
Excuse me?
2 weeks from yesterday.
Yes.
Monday.
At this point, it looks like it will be a light agenda. I only have 2 items for the agenda, so it may be a short meeting.
Okay, that would surprise me. We'll see. Okay, thank you, everybody. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.